wrestling, gumbo to grits, politics to poetry, and all things Southern in between, this is Take on the South. Produced by the Institute for Southern Studies in the McCausland College of Arts and Sciences at the University of South Carolina, Take on the South explores the highs and lows of the American South, examines the truth and fictions of the country's most distinctive region, and picks the brains of some of its most accomplished students. To understand the South, you need to take it on, and that's what we'll be doing. Join us as we take on the South. I'm going to dive straight into today's podcast by saying just 3 letters everyone will recognize immediately. BBQ. That's right. Today we look at the origins, meaning, making, and consumption of one of the South's most distinctive dishes, barbecue. To help us on our way, we have the Assistant Director of Southern Studies, Dr. Matt Simmons, an expert on all things Southern, including barbecue. He eats it, he researches it, and most importantly, he teaches an immensely popular course on it. Matt, welcome to Take on the South yet again.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. It's interesting to sit on this side of the table. It's been a while.
I know it is. I've been that side myself. All right, what's the course that you're putting on?
Southern Studies 350, Barbecue, Southern History and Culture on a Plate. That's the official title of the class.
I love it. So you taught this last year, and it was immensely popular, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of these classes. I had taught a unit about barbecue in another class 3 years ago, and one of the students in that class, she kept harassing me, saying, "Dr. Simmons, you got to teach a whole class on this.
Right.
This was the greatest part of this class. It was one little 2-week unit. She says, you got to teach something on this." I said, all right, and she keeps harassing me about it. You got to do it. You got to do it. You got to do it. Without exaggeration, I'm walking through the horseshoe one day. What was it? Spring of 24. And this kid, I don't know, from Adam, comes up to me and says, "Are you Dr. Simmons?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "I hear you're teaching a class on barbecue." I'm like, "Oh,
good news."
Okay. And then this happens a couple more times, and I finally go up to this one student because I know who it was. I'm like, "What did you do?" She said, "I told her about you teaching a class on barbecue." So at that point, I had to create this class because it's about a 6-month approval process to get a new course on the books. It was on the books for the first time this last spring. When it opened up for registration, I said, I'm just going to see what this is going to do. I'm going to have 100 seats, whatever. Right. When it opened up for registration last November, it filled 100 seats in 72 hours. And I had people asking me for overrides until I hit the fire marshal capacity for the room. So that was it.
Well, I visited one of your lectures, and I can see why it was so popular. Fantastic course. And you're going to be offering it pretty much every spring. Is that right?
That's the plan until nobody wants to take it anymore. but that's the plan right now.
All right. So it's going to be offered spring 2026.
That's right.
Okay. All right. I was going to say I'm going to pretend I know nothing about this, but I don't really have to pretend. So let's imagine a poor Englishman coming to the South for the first time, full of fish and chips, and then he hears about this thing called Southern barbecue. Educate him. What is it exactly? What is Southern barbecue?
Well, this will be surprising to me because my understanding is they actually do have barbecue places on the west end of London, but depends on which side of the Thames you've been on, I reckon. So
yeah, but I mean, are they Southern barbecue places?
That I don't know. That I don't know. I've just heard about this. Okay, so when you define barbecue, you're walking to a landmine.
All right.
So in the Carolinas, people are going to associate barbecue and people are going to fight about this, and I used to be one of the arch partisans of this perspective, that barbecue was a noun, not a verb, and referred to a foodstuff, not a social gathering.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
It also referred exclusively to hogs, or to pork, rather. Not to whole hog, but we'll get into that. But pork that is slowly cooked over wood coals. In Texas, they're going to argue a similar sort of thing, but they're going to say beef. And they're also going to say, here's this real great exclusion. It's only this and only ever that. That is what I myself believed for a long, long time. But when you start digging into the history of it, the history is a lot more weird, right? And maybe we'll explore some of that history in a little bit. But the way I like to think of barbecue now, define it now, is barbecue is depending on where you are, yes. If you're in North or South Carolina, barbecue is chopped pork that is doused, that is slowly cooked over wood, at least in theory. Most of the time now, most places it's electric and they're sort of cutting corners, but we can look past that. That is doused in some kind of sauce that is going to have a base that is going to be vinegar, typically apple cider vinegar, with some salt and then some sort of other spices put in, typically black pepper and red pepper flake, and some other spices too, maybe a few other amendments. But it's going to have that as its base and then other amendments on top, right? So you're going to have all that. But if you really want to understand what barbecue is, because I'm already trying to hedge here, right? My naive English friend. I can tell you what barbecue is here, but what barbecue is here ain't going to be what it is over yonder.
All right.
So what I can say is that barbecue is a foodstuff and a cultural event that explains and helps to make sense of the entire cultural history of the southern United States.
That's a big claim, and I like that kind of paradigm, all right? All right, so we're going to get into the variations in a bit. What are the origins of barbecue? Where does it come from?
Oh, now I just walked into the biggest landmine possible. All right. So the word barbecue itself is, as best people are able to tell, an English corruption of a Spanish word that is itself a corruption of an indigenous Caribbean word that means a raised wooden platform used to preserve food on / cook food on.
Okay.
So the Taino, who were the people in the Caribbean that the Spanish first encountered, that Columbus first encountered, they were commented on as using these raised structures that they would use to dry fruits and vegetables, dry roots and that kind of stuff, but they would also use it to sort of smoke meats, right? Typically fish, shorebirds, and even things like iguanas, right? This structure actually shows up in the amongst the Powhatan Confederacy, amongst the indigenous peoples of the Carolina coast too as well. So this seems like a pretty widespread kind of structure and use in most of native North America, at least, or the Atlantic-facing Native America, and throughout the Caribbean. So the term within a few generations of Europeans hanging around here did not mean the structure anymore. It meant the food stuff that was cooked on something like unto that, right? That's what it meant. And then it also quickly became associated with parties and heavy drinking and everything too. Right. But so that's where the word comes from. But pretty quickly you're already looking at ways of preparing food that then kind of reaches this really interesting synthesis on the plantation in Virginia in the late 17th century. As David Hackett Fisher tells us, most of the people who settle in Virginia were from the south, and most of the white people that settle in Virginia are from the south and west of Britain. In the south and west of Britain, according to culinary historians, there was already a long-standing fire roasting meat tradition. This is against sort of oven-roasted meat traditions in other parts of Britain and sort of boiled meat traditions in yet other parts of Britain. So you had the white people that came here, at least the first wave of white people, already bringing this sort of fire-roasted meat tradition. Right. Then when you have blacks brought over here as enslaved workers, the slaves are bringing over sort of meat roasting traditions too that are also present in West Africa. Then you have the Native American traditions that we've already sort of discussed that are already there. All these kind of show up together on the plantation in Virginia. And what you have is you have this event that happens with some regularity, but is really an event where the plantation owner can celebrate and can sort of give gifts to his enslaved workforce. In the sort of Eugene Genovese talks about that kind of thing a lot in Roll Jordan Roll, places like that. You kind of have that go on. And what you see emerge is this pattern that will then spread throughout the rest of the South, which is a regular sort of communal feast where you have trenches dug. In those trenches are hardwood coals placed. Then you have a lattice of green sticks. They're green so they don't burn, so they've got plenty of sap in them so they don't burn.
Right.
And then you are laying whole animal carcasses over this, and you are fire roasting those whole animal carcasses. This was typically done by enslaved blacks, but over time, especially in the Piedmont South, you see more and more sort of lower status whites beginning to do much of the same sort of stuff, but Scotch Irish, and particularly in Piedmont, North and South Carolina, Germans are doing this as well. And you kind of and pretty much everywhere you go in the South, say in 1800, if you're in the Mississippi Territory or you're up in the Tidewater of Virginia, where you see Southerners, you are seeing this same sort of process being done.
Gotcha.
Right? And it's not just hogs. It's really any kind of animal. I have something I can read to you in a minute to illustrate this. And we can talk about how it becomes hog exclusive after Reconstruction. We can get into that. But this is kind of where you see everywhere. Now, the controversial thing about what I just said, here in South Carolina especially, the official line of the state of South Carolina Tourism Board, the South Carolina Barbecue Association, and the founder of the South Carolina Barbecue Association, Lake High, Lake High, in his book, South Carolina Barbecue, A History, right, says that barbecue begins in South Carolina. He makes his claim because he says that when the Spanish settled Santa Elena, he says he has evidence that they brought hogs with them. And the presumption is that they brought hogs with them, they must have fire roasted them there with the chickera or whatever the native people would have been there in Santa Elena.
Gotcha.
The problem with that, though, is it's an anachronistic definition that presumes that barbecue is only smoked hog.
Right.
And not this sort of broader thing where it's actually a sort of social event that is a blending of English, African, and Native American cultures there together.
Yep.
I also don't know if there's actually evidence the Spanish actually brought hogs over with them or not.
Fair point. So is this what makes it Southern? I mean, do you find this in New England or the Middle Colonies or Pennsylvania?
So you have in New England, you have mentions of barbecues in the 17th century, but they're almost always called Virginia barbecues.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
And really it means drinking parties.
Okay.
So
different.
it's basically there might have been some food there,
Right.
but a Virginia
weren't
barbecue. But I mean, sometimes it was right. I mean,
well,
it's not that it wasn't hogs,
right.
but it's just it wasn't hog exclusive.
Okay.
But when you see the first references we have to barbecue in American in things printed in America. Are actually in New England, but they're referring to these things they call Virginia barbecues, which are essentially these bacchanals going out that are happening out in the woods.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. That makes perfect sense. So they're not really barbecue as we'd understand it.
Whether or not they're eaten is really doesn't matter. And similarly, at the end of the 17th century, in Charleston, they have these things called barbecue houses, and they don't. We don't have any record of what they were eating there in these barbecue houses.
Right.
These barbecue houses are places to go and drink.
Yep.
And they were essentially sort of frat houses where everybody would go and turn on a big drunk, over the weekend, and that was the barbecue house. Whether or not one ate there or not wasn't really the point. There's this. It's really in the 18th century, and especially as colonial politics really heat up, that the plantation tradition of the communal feast begins to spread throughout the rest of the South, and the word barbecue starts to move from the feast itself to more and more of the food stuff.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about hogs for just a minute.
Sure.
A lot of people, I mean, when I teach my Old South class, make the point that in 1860, the value of hogs in the South was 3 times the value of cotton.
I had no idea about that. That's amazing.
Huge. And that's largely because you had no fence laws, people could roam, eat. And if you're Grady McWhinney, you can make the argument that that's a leisure ethic, right?
Yes.
So at what point, Matt, do you sort of stick on the timeline where barbecue, as we think about it in South Carolina as pork, at what point on the timeline can you say, yeah, that's roughly the decade when it starts to become pork and identifiably Southern?
Okay. I think it's always identifiably Southern, but when it becomes pork I'm going to say after Reconstruction.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you an example of this. So this is one thing I always read to my students. So this is William Gilmore Simms' novel Jocelyn. This is a novel he writes in 1867. Okay. This is after the war. Simms had written a series of, he called them romances. He thought the novel was a sort of feminine term, right. And he preferred romance, which he thought of as prose epics, essentially.
Sure.
He has a series of romances he writes about the Revolutionary War in Carolina that he sees as this epic story of the birth of America, and Carolina's part of it.
Right.
He's finished it well before the war. In 1867, he kind of returns back to the well, and he writes essentially a prequel to that called Jocelyn, which is about 2 brothers, last name Jocelyn, and they're sort of becoming sort of patriot leaders in the early 1770s down in Aiken County, okay? And it takes place right kind of on the Savannah River is where the book takes place. So this is a moment where there's a big political hullabaloo, right? And this is where a lot of barbecue was eaten initially, was at these big speechifying events, right?
Yeah.
So this is one of these. This is a chapter called The Barbecue. This is chapter 7, The Barbecue, from William Gilmore Simms' 1867 novel, Jocelyn. The narrator interjects here. Of course, everyone knows what is meant by a barbecue. In a neighboring grove, an ox entire undergoes the roast over a pit. He is barbecued. There are smaller barbecues in progress, also of sheep and goats. Hoe cakes are bound at numerous fires. Wagons and other vehicles surround the charmed circle. Barrels of applejack and kegs of Jamaica and molasses beer and cakes and other junkets are to be found in certain other wagons, over the ends of which a gay green bush gives sufficient sign of the creature comforts in which they contain and are prepared to furnish. All right, so what did you notice was conspicuously missing?
Well, that's interesting. So it's not hog exclusive, right?
It was not high exclusive. Now, again, he is setting this in the 1760s, but he's writing the 1860s, right? What you see, there's a really interesting thing that has to do with how barbecue also tells the story of Southern demographic change and Southern urbanization. Barbecue is always a rural phenomenon for the first 200 or so years of its existence. It's a plantation phenomenon, or when it moves beyond the plantation, it's something where you're going to have a big political speech, you're going to have a 4th of July, some sort of celebration like that. You're going to take a grove out in the woods, you're going to dig a pit, dig the trenches, you're going to cook the meat over that, whether it's oxes, hogs, sheep. Really, it's whatever the farmers around have to donate.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So whatever they have excess of, right? You know, you've got some old ox, you know, they're too old to pull the plow in it, slit their neck unless, cook them up good, right? So whatever you have there. I also have this theory that high status people, if they're putting on a barbecue, in the 18th and early 19th century, first 2/3 of the 19th century, if they're going to do that, they're going to use ruminants, not hogs, because this is just my theory.
Okay.
Ruminants need large amounts of land to graze. So by giving sheep or cows, you're actually showing wealth. Hogs, because you can take a room the size we're in right now, put a hog in it, fatten him up to 180 pounds, easy, right? There's no display of wealth there.
Fair. Wow.
So here's what happens. as you know, in the aftermath of Reconstruction, you have a shift you have an increasing urbanization in the South. Many towns and cities sort of spring into existence, and more people are beginning to move to those towns and cities. What you see in the 1880s is the beginning of this thing that's always referred to in the newspapers as the barbecue men, right? Mm-hmm. So a barbecue man can come and he can ply his wares in this town, and he's going to set up in a park in this town, and he's going to serve, old style Southern barbecue, right? What he's doing is he's taking the flavors of the rural South and moving them to an urban context. Of course, for him to do this consistently and for him to do this cost effectively, it's much easier to use hogs than cows and sheep and goats and all those things. Gotcha. And so what happens is the shift to that's the first half of this, is the shift to a more urbanized South is allowing and urban Southerners are now wanting to participate still in the fantasy of the good days gone by. Mm-hmm. This gives them a way to have that flavor, and there's a practical reality of the hog allows them, the barbecue man, sometimes white, sometimes black, to be able to do that more effectively. The other thing I think is interesting here, though, is in this same era, out in the rural communities, you start seeing poor farmers, both black and white, trying to find other means of providing income streams for themselves. Mm-hmm. And this is where you start seeing these barbecue shacks begin to show up in the rural South, where a farmer might do his work all through the week, and then what he'll do is Friday afternoon, he'll cut off a little early. He will kill a hog. He will then, Friday they'll stop, midday, they'll have hog killing day, and then they'll roast the hog all night. Mm-hmm. And then Saturday afternoon, they will then be open to sell barbecue out to people there, right? Gotcha. And I think both of those things, both this work of necessity, economic necessity by increasingly sort of desperate, poor black and white farmers in the rural South looking for an additional income stream, and this urbanized South looking for the barbecue men to let them participate in the fantasies of the glorious days gone by, both of which are on the rise after Reconstruction. That's where you start to see this move to hog-exclusive barbecue. Gotcha. It takes a generation or two, but by the time you get in between the world wars, that's really all. That's all. Like this sort of Sims festival with whatever animals you have, which had been the dominant way barbecue had been done for centuries, right? Since the 17th century, has now expired, and now we have barbecue as a simultaneously hog exclusive and a commercial thing, more than a sort of communal event.
And it's heavily gate kept too, because if you tried to sell a modern Southerner on a Sims barbecue, they wouldn't recognize it.
No, they wouldn't recognize it. They wouldn't recognize it because, this is the other thing, is so much of what we think about barbecue that seems eternal. The great John Shelton Reed says that barbecue is the closest thing we in America have to Europe's wines and cheeses. You drive 100 miles and the barbecue is different. Yep. That is true. But the thing is, this differentiation into regional styles that is heavily gatekept is something that really only begins to appear really between the world wars and really only solidifies into this is how we do this is how they do that. That really only becomes solid really in the last 75, 80 years. So this is, the English historian, Eric Hobsbawm has this idea of the invented tradition, something that seems eternal but is really quite recent. Yeah. This sort of, Middle and South Carolina only does mustard barbecue. Yeah, that's true. But if you go back 200 years ago, they're doing this kind of Sims thing, which was also happening in Alabama, which was also happening in Virginia, which was also happening in Tennessee.
Let's talk about that drive of 100 miles, right? And take us through these regional indexes to, well, this is mustard in the Midlands. What's in the upstate? What's in the low state? Or low country? And, what are the other kinds available to people to index their regionality?
There are two. So the basic barbecue sauce, the mostly now people make the differentiation by sauce. There used to be other things differentiated. What cuts of the hog are you using?
Okay.
That is increasingly, especially in the PD of South Carolina and in eastern North Carolina and up into Virginia, and in parts of West Tennessee, whole hog barbecue was the standard thing because of a whole variety of things having to do with cost and, what Smithfield Packing is willing to sell and all these kind of things. It's increasingly difficult to source whole hogs.
Okay.
So you have less and less people doing whole hogs now, and it's and there's still some differences like what cuts some people use, but the big thing that differentiates now is sauce.
Okay.
Right. And again, this is something that again seems eternal, but is really only 80, 100 years old. Right. There's this whole theory that Midland South Carolina has mustard-based sauce because the German immigrants brought it down the Great Wagon Road.
Right.
Commercially prepared yellow mustard has only existed for the last 115 years.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
That's that. And those same people who came down the Great Wagon Road to settle in the Midlands of South Carolina with German last names, their cousins settled in the Piedmont of North Carolina, and they don't have mustard-based sauce there.
Right.
This is not something they're bringing, right? They're not bringing. I've heard people say, well, it's because we have Palatine Germans, and other people like, they have Palatine Germans in the Piedmont of North Carolina and Virginia too, right?
Yeah.
It's just that to me, it's a wonderful fantasy. It's a wonderful mythology. But
So what is the answer? Why is it?
the answer is because someone, probably Joe Bessinger,
Okay.
basically was experimenting with some things one day, came up with a mustard-based sauce, and a sauce that was augmented by mustard, liked it, and it caught on.
Yep.
And the issue is that most of the white barbecue men in central South Carolina, as in the Piedmont of North Carolina, are all, for complex sociological reasons, of German heritage.
Okay.
But that means their ancestors came down the Great Wagon Road in the 1730s and 1740s, right?
Gotcha.
They didn't bring it with them. So that's probably what happened. There are a few other theories about this as well.
Right.
But the one I've seen that seems most plausible, somebody made this up one day on a whim, probably Maurice Bessinger's dad,
Yep.
and it just kind of caught on.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's that. But as far as your question about how to get around,
Yeah.
let's look here in South Carolina.
Yep.
In South Carolina, you have 4.5 sauces. Okay? All right. You have 4 main sauces. You have 3 main sauces, 1 minor sauce, and then a micro sauce.
Okay.
The 3 main sauces. In the PD, down towards the low country, is essentially the mother sauce, if you will. This is what you saw essentially everyone doing. There is a great WPA narrative by a black man who had been enslaved in Union County, and he gives his barbecue sauce recipe. He says, "Master always had me, make the barbecue because I had a talent for, and a wonderful thing, anointing the meat," is what he says. I had a talent for anointing the meat. And his sauce is apple cider vinegar, salt, dried red peppers, not black pepper, because remember, we only got black pepper because of the British Empire. Remember that, right?
Right.
But again, dried red pepper, that's indigenous to North America.
Yeah.
And then a whole bunch of other herbs. He's oregano and basil and sage and all this kind of stuff. He throws all these things in there. And butter, right? That's the sauce that he made.
Okay.
So that kind of sauce is very common throughout the history of barbecue. But the big thing that we see, and this is going to evolve into sort of the simplest version of this sauce, which you see in eastern North Carolina, the PD of South Carolina, down to the low country. Apple cider vinegar, red pepper flake, now black pepper as well, and salt.
What would this be called? Is it vinegar?
It's just barbecue sauce.
Oh, is this your standard?
No, people might just say, well, I'm from that part of the world, so to me it's just barbecue sauce.
Okay, you're right.
This is what people say is vinegar sauce.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
But again, essentially every barbecue sauce you're thinking, essentially every barbecue sauce that exists starts with that.
Gotcha.
Everything else adds something to that. Right. That's sort of the mother sauce.
Your mustard is added to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's your sort of base sauce, right? And then that's, again, here in South Carolina, that's going to be PD and Low Country.
Okay.
When you move towards the Midlands, you're going to have that same sauce, but mustard. Yep. Typically, Yalla prepared mustard is going to be added to this in some way. Okay. And that's going to be the very distinctive Carolina Gold sauce, which is, so distinctive and so well known. And that's not everyone in South Carolina, but that's what everybody from outside of South Carolina thinks is all South Carolina.
Correct, right.
And again, that probably was because, Joe Bessinger probably just kind of came up with it on a whim and it caught on. It's delicious. I love it. And then when you move towards the upstate, you get the same kind of sauce that you see in the Piedmont of North Carolina, right? Because, again, these things, the state boundaries don't really matter, right?
Right.
What you're going to have there is going to be essentially the sort of typical vinegar sauce, but you're going to have some tomato, typically in the form of ketchup, but sometimes with, some sort of tomato sauce or, something like that added. But some sort of tomato product is going to be added there. Not heavy. It's still going to be very thin and very runny. It's not going to be like your thick grocery store barbecue sauce, right? It's not going to be anything like that. Okay. But that's going to be your red sauce, right? Okay. Along the Savannah River, you do get, and this is not as common anymore, but you historically would get a sort of something that you would see in Georgia, which is very similar to what you see in most of the Deep South, which really comes out of the Memphis metro area, right? The Mid-Carolina area, which is going to be a thicker tomato sauce that is also going to be quite spicy, right? So you're going to have that. So that's a sort of minor sauce. That's the three majors. That one's the kind of minor sauce we don't see very often anymore. Okay. And then the micro sauce.
Okay, I'm curious about this.
Is called rust gravy.
Rust gravy.
This is this wonderful sauce that you have really just in Orangeburg, and increasingly there's only like 2 places in Orangeburg you can find it. Yep. Wow. And this is a sort of orange sauce. Okay. Which at least seems to be intentionally or unintentionally or just serendipitously a kissing cousin of a similar sauce called brown sauce in Virginia. All right. Which is kind of like you take the mother sauce, you add some ketchup and some mustard. Okay. So this is called brown sauce in Virginia. This is sort of parallel to it here in Orangeburg, which is called rust gravy. It seems like, again, one family that eventually divided into 2 restaurants comes up with that, and it just doesn't really catch on. But if you find it in Orangeburg, it's daggum delicious.
All right, so a student taking Southern Studies 350, do they get to taste barbecue? Do they get to have an experiential relationship with barbecue in some fashion?
Yes, and this is where I got myself in some trouble last year. Okay. There is a class on this campus taught by the School of Hospitality, which is the craft beer class. Okay. And every class meeting, they drink craft beer, and they discuss the history of this style and the tasting notes for it, and on and on and on. I had a small fraction of my students last semester think that this is what we were going to be doing, eating barbecue every single class. Right. I had to disabuse them of that notion, and I did lose a few students who said, if that's not what we're doing, I'm going to drop, right? But regardless, we can't do that because we don't have a kitchen and we don't have, and like for food safety regulations, I can't just cook for people and bring it to them. Right. But here's what I do in the class. I do go and I do bring in several styles and several examples of the various styles of barbecue sauce. We do have a barbecue sauce tasting at least once a semester. We do have that. Beyond that, in lieu of textbooks, I don't require the students to buy any textbooks. We use a history of barbecue written by a guy named Robert F. Moss, and another one written by a guy named Joe Haynes. But I have those. I get those. The university libraries has been so kind to purchase a ebook version of that I can provide my students for them to use, and they're, so they don't have to go buy textbooks for me. But in lieu of textbooks, there's a course fee. Okay. And the course fee is 3 times this semester you have to go get barbecue yourself.
All right.
I have 3 lists of barbecue restaurants. and you have to sample each of these lists. One is what I call bougie barbecue, right? Which is this move recently that you've seen in a lot of places, in especially cities like ours, where you have more sort of a barbecue becomes a more sort of boutique thing, where you're going to have all the different styles of barbecue. You know, you're going to have Texas brisket, Carolina pork. You're going to have Memphis-style ribs. You're going to have that, and they'll have a line of 5, 6, 7, 8 sauces from all around the South to try.
Right.
These places are great. They make a really high-quality product.
This is like home team barbecue.
Stuff like home team.
Yeah, gotcha.
Great, very high-quality product. No problem with something like sticky fingers, something like that, right? Mm-hmm. No problem with these places in that way. But they're doing something very different with barbecue. Mm-hmm. They're selling barbecue. I would say they're selling barbecue as a lifestyle to non-Southerners alongside ideas of South, right? So, go experience that, because I want them to eat that and enjoy the food. But this isn't really a restaurant review. I mean, there's part of you review the food, but you're also looking at, okay, what version of South is trying to be presented to me here?
Right.
The second list is your sort of standard issue, places like Doc's, places like Palmetto Pig, which are going to have, you're going to have Carolina pork barbecue, but they're going to have 2 or 3 different sauces for you. Because then everybody likes mustard, some people like red sauce. They're going to have the lots of options on the buffet to eat, and so on and so forth, right? You have those places too. That's what most people in the South, where most of them experience barbecue.
Right.
Then I have what I call the hyper-traditional places.
Okay.
The places where you have no choices on the menu. They have what they have.
Yep.
And you go. And you get it. These are going to be the places that are going to tend to do stuff, still do whole hogs, still cook over wood, take no shortcuts, and have an incredibly limited menu. So I have students go visit these places and say, well, what version of South is being presented here? And then students are really having to reflect on, what does this actually mean? How do I make sense of this? A lot of the hyper-traditional places, it was interesting. I had students who grew up in South Carolina, if they went to one of these hyper-traditional places, like Heights in West Columbia, and they went there, and it was what they grew up eating, that style, they loved it more than anything. If it was somewhere where they did not grow up eating mustard barbecue, let's say they're from Western North Carolina, they didn't grow up eating mustard barbecue, this is all you have? I don't have any options? They wanted to push back against it. Interestingly, the kids from Philadelphia, almost to a person, love those kind of places because they said, even if it was not to my taste, it reminded me of the cheesesteak shops back home, which are, you come, you get what we got, and you can like it or you can leave.
Yep.
And they kind of like that. The most interesting student I had all semester, I had a young woman who was born to Russian immigrant parents. And she grew up kind of in this world as an American kid growing up in New England, also with Russian immigrant parents who had left the Soviet Union and were very kind of struggling with their own placement in America and still feeling very Russian, but feel like not only the Soviet Union, but now Putin has betrayed Russia to them.
Right.
And she did not like a lot of the barbecue we had, and she did not understand why we were fussing over about it so much.
Okay.
But by the end of the semester, she said she actually came to understand that in Southerners arguing over barbecue as much as we were arguing what it meant to be from a place, which was the same thing that her grandma and her mother and her father in fleeing Russia were arguing about, and how they belong or don't belong to a place. And she said, my little barbecue class helped her to understand herself as a Russian as much as it did anything else.
What a compliment.
So again, they go eat barbecue in these places. And also, at the end of the semester, we do try to have a big hootenanny and all get together and get someplace to cater us. And we had, Sheely's, one of the, biggest barbecue places here in Milton, South Carolina, catered a big, huge party we had last day of class, and it was daggone ball.
Do you have a favorite traditional South Carolina barbecue restaurant?
I have 2.
Okay.
I have there's Heights in West Columbia. I absolutely love that place. And then there is McCabe's in Mannon. I also love. They're two different styles. Heights is your sort of mustard style, but it's whole hog cooked over wood, and their hash is magnificent because they still put offal in it and whole hog's heads and everything, and it's delicious, so good. We do a whole thing about hash too. McCabe's is your PD, very traditional. It's kind of what I grew up on, from being from southeastern North Carolina. But it's probably the second best expression of that simple vinegar-based whole hog barbecue I've ever had in my life.
Really? Wow. Is it famous, McCabe's?
No, because it is very humble. I want people to go there because I want to give them people money, but like it's tiny.
Yeah.
It's only open Friday and Saturday.
Oh, really?
They only take cash. They have a buffet, but it's one of these things where you go in and like the family that runs it, they make your plate for you, and it feels like you've gone to somebody's house for
interesting.
For dinner on Sunday.
How interesting.
That's what it feels like, and it is so good. I mean, it's the second best vinegar-based whole hog barbecue I've ever had in my life, and I've had a lot of them. It is the second best I've ever had. It is incredible.
Well, that's a powerful endorsement.
And don't get me wrong, Heights is the best mustard barbecue I've ever had. Heights is astoundingly good.
I know that you do a lot else in this class. You talk about the chemistry of cooking and sauce making.
Students have to make they have to make their own sauce. They leave my class with their own signature barbecue sauce recipe they can carry with them the rest of their lives.
Did you taste them?
I tasted many of them.
Are they any good?
One young woman gave me her Cheerwine-based barbecue sauce. She called her porch sipping sauce. And my goodness, Mark, this thing was astoundingly good. Really? Emma, if you're out there, Emma, you're watching this, I need some more of that.
You could bottle this and sell it.
It was so good.
So you taste this stuff?
Yes.
Were any just appalling? They just couldn't.
The ones that weren't hitting on much, they didn't. They didn't had to turn in a bottle of this stuff. Right. They had to turn in like the recipe, and then they had to turn in a journal of their experiments and what they did, along with photographs of them making everything. Gotcha. So they couldn't just copy and paste the recipe off the internet. Right. But I did have a few students turn in theirs, and I didn't get any bad ones. All the ones that I got were really good.
Oh,
good.
Good.
And Emma, if you're out there watching, that porch sipping sauce, say magnifique.
She's got a product ready to go. All right, Matt. Anything else you want to tell us about the course before we sign off? Yeah, I mean,
I really, here's my secret goal, my not so secret goal. I'm going to make known to everybody right now.
All right.
I love teaching this class, and I want it to be the biggest class on our campus. That is my aim. That's what I'm shooting for. So I'm going to try to do some new things this semester to attract even more students. We're going to have industry leaders. We're going to have people that own restaurants, people that do marketing for restaurants. Going to try to get them to come and speak. We're really going to dig into the chemistry of things. We're going to try to do some more about barbecue as a sort of festival event. Sort of competition barbecue, that kind of thing. I'm trying to play with a whole lot of things and bring in a whole lot of stuff. Yep. So whatever you're interested in, you leave with something. And my selling point, because I know everybody's like, I'm going to sign up for the class, but my dad's going to say, why in the world am I paying tuition for a barbecue class? I'm going to also teach you how to make stuff. So next 4th of July, when you make those ribs, and your daddy's like, this is so good, you say, Daddy, this was the tuition you paid for that barbecue class you said was not worth anything.
Well, Dr. Matt Simmons, thanks so much for teaching this class. I think your ambition will be realized because I think you have a cap of 120 next semester.
150.
150. Well, there we go. It's only going to get bigger, and our students couldn't be in better barbecue hands. Thanks so much.
I'm having a good time, and I look forward to doing it again. And thanks for talking to me, Mark.
All right. That was our take on the South. Let us know yours. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at U of SC South. Be sure to click and subscribe. Take on the South is produced by the Institute for Southern Studies and the McCausland College of Arts and Sciences at the University of South Carolina. Special thanks to Professor Dave Garner of the University of South Carolina School of Music for composing our soundtrack. Tune in next time for another Take on the South.